Hi, everybody. This is the third time I've tried to do this episode because today I also recorded Bolshevik stuff. And so I was kind of waiting for Kevin. And then whenever we were having technical difficulties and I thought it would be like a whole thing, I would come on here and try and talk. And then it just like never was adequate. But it's the Hatening. Hi. Hey, what's up? So today I want to talk about giving people rides, whether that would be you getting a ride or you giving a ride or something like that. The act of like, asking other people for transportation. And unfortunately, that is something that we all have to deal with. We live in commuter culture. We live in a country where the automotive industry is one of the most powerful lobbying groups that we have ever had. Between Henry Ford and everybody else, that's what makes America move. That is what we have to deal with. So because of that, we have no public transit. There's no public transportation. There is really no way to get around freely and cheaply, and most people can't walk to their job and to amenities. Most people can't really ride a bike to their amenities and jobs and stuff. Technically you could, but it would be, inefficient time-wise, so you have to drive. And, we have Ubers and we have Lyfts and all that bullshit. These companies that are capitalizing on the fact that we live in a car-based country. But what are you going to do? You can't really do much aside from, trying to play electoralism and make, your municipality just like have more buses and shit, but we all have to get rides essentially, right? It is going to be very difficult for you to be an American and live in America without access to a vehicle, whether it is yours or a friend or a car for hire, right? All of us know people who don't have driver's license and have never driven a car, but they live in a city, And so within like their very, very, very tight-knit microcosm, they can take the subway and they can get taxis and stuff. But for a lot of us who don't live in, hyper-condensed urban areas, like you have to drive, right? Like where I grew up, like out in Western Maryland, like everyone got their license as soon as they could. And obviously, like, it was like a working middle class area, so cheap cars were available to people. And I guess I'm flexing privilege on the fact that I was able to get a car when I was like 16, It wasn't a good car. It was a Volvo that was owned by my neighbors, and it had like 200,000 miles on it when I got the fucking car, because they had taught all of their, it was like the entire family's like kids' first car thing, and all their kids were like fucking grown by the time I came around and came of age to get a car. And so when like my mom was talking about me needing a vehicle, they were just like, oh, this shit's been sitting out front forever, like take it, it's fucking cheap. So I ended up buying it for like really cheap from my own money of my first job type of, what I mean, some typical white middle class American small town bullshit. But like when I was old enough to fucking drive, I was the rides. I think I was the first in the friend group to get their license, I think. If not, I was the second. But I mean, like, I remember those days very vividly where I was everyone's ride everywhere. All the homies. If you wanted to go to a party or to fast food or to the mall or to, wherever the fuck, I was always the ride. And that was just like, you accept the role. People give you gas money, people smoke you up, people give you free whatever the fuck. They'll pay for your shit, like in turn for you, like providing your labor of driving. And I was used to that. And so then as I got older and situations morph, like, for instance, like when I would come home from college, like I didn't have a dedicated vehicle. And so I was dependent upon my homies to drive me from the airport back home or from the airport to wherever we were crashing. And then if I needed to go anywhere, I had to ask people for rides. And so it became a kind of like this barter system of like, yeah, give me a ride and I'll smoke you out. Give me a ride, I'll give you cigarettes. Give me a ride, I'll pay for your food if we go here. If you want to give me a ride to the fucking liquor store, I'll buy you a 40. If you want to give me a ride to Burger King, I'll buy you chicken nuggets type of shit. And, that's kind of how it still is now, right? Like, you still have people who like want hacks. For those who don't live in Baltimore, that's kind of like underground taxi service type of thing where you make a hand motion, people pick you up, you give them what you can, they give you a ride as far as they're willing to take you. But like on the other end of that, like I know a lot of people who don't drive, who don't want to drive, and sort of just kind of expect people to drive them around, you know? Like there are a lot of people who just are afraid to drive or don't want to drive, who can't afford to have a car, thus they don't have a license and stuff like that. And you know, everyone who doesn't drive has, you know, their own reason not to. And some of them are fine, others are kind of shitty or whatever, but that's neither here nor there. But the fact is, like, there are people who don't drive and people who do drive, and you know, there's a lot of people who don't drive who kind of just expect people to drive them around. And sometimes it becomes predatory and one-sided and shitty, you know? I know my fair share of people who just sort of expect to get rides whenever they need one, you know? Because of your social relationship to them, whether they're your partner, your friend, your coworker, your boss, your whatever, your roommate, your neighbor. They just kind of think, and you know, like, oh, I got this in my back pocket. Anytime that I need a ride, I can hit up this person and they'll inevitably give me their shit. Which is fucked up, right? At the same time, like, everyone does have the homies where, like, if I needed a ride, I could call you at any time of day or night and you would probably come get me if it's an emergency. Everyone needs that, right? I am that person for, you know, for some people. You know, there are some friends and family members and, you know, chosen family included in the term family member, where it's like, yo, if you ever need a ride, like, day or night, like, I got you. You know what I mean? Your car breaks down, you get arrested, you are too drunk to drive, things like that. You know what I mean? You can't just get home. You know, you can't walk. You can't get the fucking bus. A lot of times buses don't fucking run, you know what I mean? So you're going to need a ride somewhere, and everyone needs to have like that lifeline, that support system where you can get a ride. Sometimes it sucks when you are the driver, you know? And I've been in that situation many times where I have felt taken advantage of because I had the car and the person knew at the end of the day I would never tell them no, and I felt taken advantage of, you know? And then at the same time, like, I recognize now, you know, in my wise old age, that I was the same way. Like, there were people who I just expected to always pick up the phone and people who I always expected to give me a ride, whether it was a couple blocks or a couple miles or a couple, you know, increments of 15, 30 minutes, right? When I got back from fucking school before I had a fucking car and I was floating between Hagerstown and Baltimore, like, I expected the homies to give me a ride whenever I needed one. And I didn't realize how much that sucked until I got a car. And then I became that person for the other homies. And I quickly was pissed off about it. But, you know, you always hear about this shit where there are friends who realize that they were just used for rides. And you can see that social dynamic playing out pretty well, right? Where one member of the partnership, one member of the household, one member of the friend group has a car, or one doesn't, you know? And so it's either someone's always being asked or someone's always asking for rides, and it becomes normalized and all that stuff. And it's just like, it gets weird. Let's be honest, it gets fucking weird. Like, we're not taxi services. And I will say, like, if everyone's being respectful and communicative and it's like, yeah, I'll give you rides, but you have to pay for gas every time, or give me this much money a week or a month, and like, I'll give you rides whenever it's convenient for me. Like, that's kind of like how I had to do it in college, where I was living off campus and very far. Like, I could not feasibly get to campus from where we lived. It would have taken like an hour bike ride to a bus. That would have taken like over an hour to get to campus, type of thing. So I was very much like reliant on my roommate who had a car. And we would fight about like the validity of getting rides and giving rides and stuff like that. And, you know, looking back, I was a prick a lot of times, but we still eventually developed a system where it was like I would give them money periodically so they would shut the fuck up about giving me rides when I needed them to. That wasn't convenient for them particularly. You know, and then like in more recent stuff, like I have had social situations where I was sort of expected You know, and it was either me perceiving the situation as me being expected or me straight up being expected by the other person to drive them to things, to pick them up from things, and resentment grows if you're not all on the same page, you know? And it happens very quickly, and it does. And it sucks because you need to get places and it's not convenient to get places, so you have to get a ride sometimes. You know, like there is a lot of class issues and economic issues involved with owning a car, let alone being able to drive at a certain age, you know, having the luxury of being taught and then getting that car in high school or in college or whatever the fuck, right? We take that for granted a lot, like especially like in the middle class and like the working class, but like you're fortunate enough to have these amenities where you had like the family car, where you had like the relative who would sell you something for cheap, where you had like the neighbor who had like the junker that you could get, right? Like where you had like parents who could teach you how to drive, or who also your parents also had a fucking license and could, you know what I'm saying? Like driving is an insane privilege anywhere else in the world, but in America it is like this very entitled act. Like it really is something where we're just like expected to be able to do it. And it's weird. You know, I drive for a living. I have no problem with driving people around in my spare time because I've cultivated my surrounding to where like my friends, my family aren't going to take advantage of me. But I remember very vividly like motherfuckers feeling like they're entitled to my time and my transportation services. Flip it. I also felt entitled to people's time. It's a weird thing, you know, it's a weird thing. I still feel guilty asking for rides. I still feel weird, you know, if I'm drunk, if I'm, you know, like let's say we go somewhere and you give me a ride but I need to go home immediately, right? I feel weird about asking people to drive me places. I feel very out of control. You know what I mean? It's weird. It sucks. It sucks not being able to conveniently get to where you need to go under any circumstances. But that is the society that we live in, to where like if you don't have a car and you aren't able to operate that motor vehicle at any given point, you're going to have to ask for a ride. And either you're asking it in terms of like paying for a service like an Uber taxi thing, or you're using social currency and you're asking the homies or the family or something. And sometimes motherfuckers don't want to do that, you know? It sucks. But that's just the reality of the situation. And that's the end of the episode. Thank you guys for listening so much. Andrew and I really appreciate that you continue listening to The Hatening. If you like the show, please like and subscribe. Do that wherever you're listening to podcasts. Tell your friends. It'd be fucking awesome if you did that. You can find The Hatening on all social media platforms, and from there you can find the individual profiles for myself and Andrew. I'm Lord Hooper at everything. He is Future Sucks and Mandrew Braun Says, respectively. We have two other podcasts that we do together. One is Bolsheviks with my friend Kevin. That's a politics show. The other is The Fish That Breaks the Surface, which is a book club podcast for Berserk, the manga series. We do that with our friend Nick from NASA 8. Check those out if you want to. I think you do want to, though. You know, but as always, just take care of yourself and the people around you, and don't forget to tell your friends you love them.